Welcome to another episode of How to Do the Japanese Accent. It's been a while since the last episode, in which I talked about the insertion of vowels, in particular, how and why it happens. If you haven't seen it, click the suggestion above. Over the next couple of episodes, I will be talking about how the English consonants are pronounced in the Japanese accent. In this video, I will explain how the stops and the nasals are pronounced. I specifically say English consonants because there are too many consonants to cover in one video if we include every consonant from every single language. Also, many of the consonants barely change. However, for the sake of comprehensiveness, I will cover all the consonants that are used in standard British and American English. If you want to know how a particular non-English consonant would be pronounced by a Japanese speaker, leave a comment below and I'll see what I can do. Let's begin with the stops or the plosives. You don't need to know the linguistic terminology, but stops are basically consonants that are produced by creating an obstruction or stop inside the mouth or the throat. We're going to proceed from the front of the mouth to the back of the throat. Pa and B. These consonants change very little, but there's one thing you need to pay attention to, namely the aspiration in pa. In English, voiceless stops such as pa and ta are aspirated in certain positions within a word, meaning that in order to produce these sounds, you have to let out a puff of air. In Japanese, however, we usually do not aspirate these consonants. To get an even better idea of what an aspirated consonant sounds like, in contrast to its non-aspirated counterpart, have a listen to the following sounds. Pa, ba, pa, ba, pa, ba. On the other hand, ba in both languages are not aspirated, so ba sounds pretty much the same. Therefore, Japanese speakers shouldn't have too much trouble pronouncing this sound. One thing to note about ba, however, is that because there is no distinction between ba and va in Japanese, Japanese speakers tend to confuse ba with va and vice versa. So when you are trying to imitate the Japanese accent, it would be effective to replace v's with b's sporadically, as in vibration and unbelievable. Have a listen to the following example words. Papi, people, purple, carp, popular, supper, pumped, big, beginner, suburb, bonobo, cub, herb, harbor, rubber. Ta and da. Similarly to pa, ta is also aspirated in English, whereas in Japanese it is not aspirated. Here's a contrast between aspirated t and non-aspirated t. Ta, 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 ta. Most English speakers put the tongue on the back of the upper front teeth when they pronounce ta, and this adds a hissing noise to the t sound, as in time, teach. Japanese speakers, however, tend not to produce this fricative sound, so the previous examples would sound like time and teach in the Japanese accent. Another noteworthy characteristic of the English T is its diverse pronunciations. Depending on a number of factors, including your dialect, the social situation, and the rate of speech, T can be pronounced in different ways, and sometimes it can even be deleted completely. For example, in some dialects, ta becomes a glottal stop, as in ba'a and be'a. If you don't know what a glottal stop is, think about how you say the phrase uh-oh. Between a and o, most people create a brief blockage in the throat. This is the glottal stop. This phenomenon, however, does not happen in the Japanese accent, so Japanese speakers would say bata and beta. How about the T in the word true? When preceded by R, T becomes somewhat similar to ch sound, as in church. This phenomenon also does not happen in the typical Japanese accent. Moreover, if you remember the insertion of vowels explained in the previous episode, when there are two consecutive consonants like T and R, Japanese speakers tend to insert a vowel between them. In this case, they tend to insert u as in turu, although T is typically followed by o. Another example is the word trust. In this word, the initial consonant cluster gets divided by an insertion of o as in torasto. Then what about T in the word don't? Unless you're trying to enunciate every single word, I bet most people won't pronounce the final T, as in I don't know. Most Japanese speakers tend not to delete word final consonants, so they would most likely say I don't know. The pronunciation of da, on the other hand, is much less diverse, and it is in fact pretty straightforward. Have a listen to some example words. Tiny, teacher, temptation, test, getting, Peter, timber, diver, driver, card, harder, undead, dreaded, tired, k, g, These are the third and the last pair of stops. These sounds do not change very much from English to Japanese. The only note I have to mention is the aspiration in k. Listen to the following contrast between the aspirated k and the non-aspirated k. Ka, 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 ka. Apart from that, k and g in the Japanese accent sound basically the same as they do in standard English. Here are some example words. Kind, クリスマス、クリック、キャンプ、クルーエル、クッキング、メカニカル、カックル、グッド、グレート、ガーデン、マグ、ダガー、スナグル、ガーグル、グリゲリアス。We now move on to the nasal consonants of English. There are three nasal consonants in English, namely ma, na, and nga, the last of which may be the least familiar of the three, but this third nasal consonant is basically the sound that appears at the end of words such as sing and ring. Ma does not change much from English to Japanese. Mother, mirror, summer, swimming, jammed, welcome, jump, amplitude. Na also does not change dramatically, but there are a few points to mention. Firstly, because n in Japanese takes one more to pronounce, in words that are spelt with two consecutive n's, Japanese people tend to elongate the n, or double the length of the n sound. For example, the word running is spelt with two n's, so in the mind of a Japanese speaker, this cluster should take two more to pronounce, so they would say running instead of running. Similarly, kanning instead of kanning. This rule, however, does not apply to all cases, because for instance, the surname Manning would be pronounced Manning instead of Manning with a long N, and the word winner is also pronounced winner instead of winner, partly because winner refers to sausages in Japanese. Secondly, there is a huge variation in exactly how Japanese speakers pronounce N in Japanese. That is, some speakers may produce N towards the front of the mouth, while others may produce the sound at the back of the oral cavity. For example, the word kan or can ends with n, while some speakers say kan, others say kan. This difference is barely noticeable to most people, and it honestly does not make a big difference to the understandability of the speaker's speech. However, you might notice that some Japanese speakers' pronunciation of N is sometimes slightly off compared to a native speaker's pronunciation. Here are some example words. Nice, nose, shinna, shinesto, encourage, wonderful, and silence, man, one, nga. As explained earlier, this consonant appears at the end of words like gang and hang. It can also appear in words that have the NK consonant cluster, such as think and blink. The problem for Japanese speakers is that this consonant is not a phoneme in the Japanese language, to use the technical term. In other words, nga is not part of the Japanese sound system inside native Japanese speakers' minds. This statement, however, is an oversimplification, because Japanese speakers can and do produce this sound correctly. Rather, the issue here is that most of them don't realize that they are producing it when they do. In the minds of most Japanese speakers, nga is categorized under the label n, which means that they think they are saying n when they are in fact producing nga. Because Japanese speakers don't have a mental representation of eng, they tend to divide nga into two separate consonants, namely na and ga. So words like king and long become kingu and longu, where n and ga form separate morals, and ga causes an insertion of the vowel u after it to prevent a word final consonant. Here are some example words. Wingu, rangu, shingu, shinku, shinkingu, sayingu, hunger, anger, bang. This is the end of part 1. In part 2, we will have a look at the fricatives and the affricates of the English language, and in part 3, we will practice the rest of the consonants in the Japanese accent. On my Patreon page, I will be releasing some extra videos that include extra exercises and examples. See you next time.